Have you ever wondered what would happen if the person you least expected became the one who changed your life forever? The rain had started without warning, transforming the Seattle streets into rivers of reflected light and making the evening commute even more miserable than usual. Valeria Reyes pressed her forehead against the steering wheel of her 10-year-old Honda Civic, counting to 10 before she even attempted to start the engine. 12 hours on her feet at Mercy General Hospital, running between patients, filling prescriptions, counseling worried mothers about infant dosages, and dealing with an inventory system that seemed determined to lose track of every antibiotic in the building. Her feet throbbed, her lower back ached, and all she wanted was to get home, pour herself a glass of cheap wine, and collapse on her couch with her cat, Mango. She turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed twice, and died. Valeria closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. Of course this would happen today. Of all days. She tried again. This time, the car made a sound like a wounded animal before falling completely silent. The rain drummed harder on the roof as Valeria pulled out her phone. Her mechanic's shop had closed 2 hours ago. Her brother Carlos was working the night shift at the warehouse. Her mother would panic if she called, would probably try to take 3 buses in the rain to reach her. There was no one else. She scrolled through her contacts, past the names of old friends she had drifted away from, past the number of her ex-boyfriend that she really should delete, past all the people who had once been close, but had somehow faded into acquaintances over the years of working double shifts and night classes and trying to build a life from nothing. The hospital parking garage was emptying quickly. Through her rain-streaked windshield, Valeria watched the other cars pull away, their taillights disappearing into the gray evening. She would have to call a tow truck, she realized. She would have to spend money she did not have on repairs she could not afford, and somehow she would have to figure out how to get to work tomorrow and the day after and every day until her car was fixed. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. A knock on her window made her jump. Through the water-blurred glass, she could make out a tall figure in dark clothing. Her first instinct was fear, the deeply ingrained wariness that came from being a woman alone in a parking garage. Her hand went to her phone, ready to dial emergency services. The figure knocked again, more gently this time, and Valeria noticed he was holding an umbrella. She cracked the window just enough to hear him speak. "Car trouble?" The voice was deep, cultured, with a slight accent she could not quite place. "I saw you trying to start it. I'm not much of a mechanic, but I have jumper cables in my car if that helps." Valeria peered through the narrow opening at the man's face. He was older than her, perhaps in his early 50s, with silver threading through dark hair that was neatly trimmed. His features were sharp, almost severe, but his eyes were kind. He was wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent, which was entirely out of place in a hospital parking garage at 7 in the evening. "Thank you," she said cautiously, "but I do not think it's the battery. The engine turns over, but it just dies." The man nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like it might be the fuel pump, or possibly the alternator. May I?" He gestured toward the hood. Something in his demeanor put her at ease, perhaps the formal politeness of his speech, or the fact that he had not tried to open her door or crowd her space. She popped the hood release and got out of the car, accepting the edge of his umbrella when he offered to share it. "I'm Valeria," she said, because it seemed rude not to introduce herself while he was peering into her engine. "Marcus," he replied without looking up. His hands moved with surprising confidence over the various components, checking connections and inspecting hoses. "You work at the hospital?" "I'm a pharmacist. You?" A slight pause. "I was visiting someone." There was something in the way he said it that made Valeria not ask any follow-up questions. The rain had soaked through her scrubs, and she shivered as a gust of wind swept through the garage. Marcus noticed and immediately shifted the umbrella to cover her more completely, leaving his own shoulder exposed to the downpour. "I think your fuel pump is the problem," he said finally, straightening up. "It is not something that can be fixed here. You will need a tow." He pulled out his phone before she could respond and started dialing. "I know a shop that does excellent work. They will come tonight and have it ready for you by tomorrow." "I cannot afford that kind of service," Valeria said quickly, hating how small her voice sounded. "I will just call a regular tow truck and figure it out." Marcus looked at her then, really looked, with eyes that seemed to see past her wet hair and tired face and second-hand shoes to something underneath. "Please," he said quietly. "Let me do this. I have had a very difficult day, and helping you would genuinely make me feel better." It was such a strange thing to say that Valeria found herself agreeing before she could think of a reason not to. Within 15 minutes, a flatbed tow truck arrived, operated by a young man who seemed to know Marcus well and who refused to even discuss payment. Valeria watched her car disappear into the rainy night with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Let me drive you home," Marcus offered. "My car is just over there." His car was a sleek black Mercedes that looked like it had never seen the inside of a hospital parking garage before today. Valeria hesitated at the passenger door, her common sense finally catching up with events. She was about to get into a car with a complete stranger, a wealthy stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and solved her problems with a single phone call. This was exactly the kind of situation her mother had warned her about, since she was old enough to understand warnings. But there was something about Marcus that felt genuine, something sad and tired and human beneath the expensive suit. And Valeria was too exhausted to be afraid. She gave him her address, a modest apartment complex in the Rainier Valley, and settled into the leather seat as he pulled smoothly out of the garage. The car was warm and smelled faintly of leather and something else, something clean and expensive that she could not identify. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. "You said you had a difficult day," Valeria said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Do you want to talk about it?" Marcus's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "My mother is dying," he said simply. "Cancer. The doctors say she has perhaps a month left. I'm so sorry." The words felt inadequate, but Valeria knew from years of working in healthcare that sometimes inadequate words were better than none at all. "She is 83 years old, and she has lived a full life," Marcus continued, his voice carefully controlled. "I should be at peace with it, but I am not. I am angry and scared, and I feel like a child who is not ready to be an orphan." Valeria was quiet for a moment, watching the rain slide down the window. "My father died when I was 22, she said finally. "Heart attack. No warning at all. One day he was teaching me how to change a tire, and the next day he was gone." "How long did it take to stop feeling like you were falling?" "I will let you know when I figure it out." Marcus laughed, a surprised sound that seemed to catch him off guard. "That is perhaps the most honest thing anyone has said to me in years." They pulled up to her apartment building, a plain 3-story structure with a small parking lot and a sagging awning over the entrance. Marcus looked at it with an expression that was difficult to read. "Thank you for the ride," Valeria said, reaching for the door handle, "and for fixing my car situation. I really do appreciate it." "Wait." Marcus reached into his jacket and produced a business card, elegant cream paper with embossed black lettering. "In case you need anything, or in case you want to have coffee sometime, with someone who is terrible at small talk but an excellent listener." Valeria took the card without looking at it and slipped it into her pocket. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Valeria." She ran through the rain to her building, fumbling with her keys at the security door. By the time she turned around, the Mercedes had vanished into the wet night, as if it had never been there at all. Her apartment was small but clean, a 1-bedroom unit that she had decorated with thrift store finds and plants that she talked to when no one was listening. Mango, her orange tabby, wound around her ankles as she stripped off her wet scrubs and changed into sweatpants and an old college hoodie. She poured herself the promised glass of wine and finally, collapsed onto her couch. Only then did she pull out the business card Marcus had given her. The name on the card made her heart stop. Marcus Ashford. Ashford Industries. CEO. Valeria knew that name. Everyone in Seattle knew that name. Marcus Ashford was a legend, a figure of almost mythological proportions in the business world. He had built Ashford Industries from a single software startup into a multinational conglomerate worth billions. He owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Seattle. He had been on the cover of Forbes 3 times. He was known for his ruthless business practices, his absolute refusal to give interviews, and his complete lack of public presence. People called him the Ghost of Seattle, a specter who controlled vast empires from the shadows. And he had just changed her tire, well, her fuel pump, same principle. Valeria laughed out loud at the absurdity of it, which startled Mango into hiding under the coffee table. The billionaire that everyone feared had stood in a hospital parking garage in the rain and offered her jumper cables. He had shared his umbrella. He had told her about his dying mother. She looked at the card for a long time, tracing the embossed letters with her fingertip. Then she set it on her kitchen counter, made herself a grilled cheese sandwich for dinner, and tried very hard not to think about kind eyes and a severe face. The next morning, Valeria woke to find a text from an unknown number. Your car is ready for pickup at Martinez Auto on 4th Avenue. No charge. Thank you for listening last night. M. She stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. Thank you. I hope today is easier than yesterday. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, it already is. Valeria did not expect to hear from Marcus again. Rich men did not date pharmacy technicians from Rainier Valley. That was simply not how the world worked. She picked up her car, which ran better than it had in years, and went back to her life of 12-hour shifts and grocery shopping on a budget and pretending she was not lonely. But a week later, another text arrived. There is a coffee shop on Pike Street that makes an excellent cortado. Would you like to join me? Saturday morning? She should have said no. Everything she knew about Marcus Ashford, everything she had read in old news articles and business profiles, suggested he was not someone to get involved with. He was cold, they said. Calculating. He had destroyed competitors without mercy and fired executives for the smallest failures. He was not the kind of man who changed tires in parking garages. But he was the man who had shared his umbrella. He was the man who had called his mother difficult day instead of burden or problem. He was the man who had admitted to being scared. Saturday morning, she wrote back. What time? The coffee shop was called The Roasted Bean, a tiny establishment tucked between a bookstore and a Thai restaurant on a quiet stretch of Pike Street. Valeria arrived 10 minutes early, wearing her favorite yellow sundress and the gold earrings her grandmother had given her, and found Marcus already waiting at a corner table. He stood when she approached, a gesture so old-fashioned that it made her smile. You came, he said, and there was genuine surprise in his voice. I said I would. Yes, but people often say things they do not mean. Valeria sat down across from him, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. How is your mother? Stubborn. She refuses to stay in bed and insists on supervising the nurses as if she is still running a household. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She asked about you. About me. I mentioned I had met someone. She wanted to know every detail. Valeria felt heat rise to her cheeks. What did you tell her? That you were kind, that you did not treat me like Marcus Ashford, that you talked to me like I was just a man whose car was not broken. Your car was fine. It was mine that was broken. Details. He waved a hand dismissively, and for a moment Valeria could see the ruthless businessman underneath the grieving sun. The point is, you saw me. Most people see the name, the money, the reputation. You saw someone who needed help, and you let me help you instead." Their coffee arrived, brought by a waitress who either did not recognize Marcus or was very good at pretending. The cortado was as excellent as promised, rich and smooth with just the right amount of foam. They talked for 2 hours, about everything and nothing, about Valeria's family and her dreams of opening her own pharmacy someday, about Marcus's childhood in London and his complicated relationship with his father, about books they had read and places they wanted to visit, and the particular beauty of Seattle in the autumn. It was the easiest conversation Valeria had ever had with a man. There was no posturing, no games, no attempt to impress. Marcus asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He laughed at her jokes and made terrible puns that should have been embarrassing from a billionaire. He touched her hand once, briefly, when she told him about her father, and the contact sent electricity up her arm. When they finally left the coffee shop, the morning had become afternoon, and the street outside was filled with weekend crowds. Marcus walked her to her car, which she had parked 3 blocks away. "I would like to see you again," he said formally, as if asking for a business meeting. "If that would be acceptable." Acceptable. Valeria pretended to consider. "I suppose I could fit you into my busy schedule of working and talking to my cat." "Your cat sounds like formidable competition." "He is. He has very high standards." They stood there for a moment, 2 people from different worlds who had somehow found common ground in a rainy parking garage. Then Marcus did something that surprised her. He leaned down and kissed her cheek, the lightest brush of lips against skin, and whispered, "Thank you for the best morning I have had in months." He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd with the same ghost-like quality that had earned him his nickname. Valeria stood on the sidewalk, touching her cheek, feeling like she had just stepped through a door into a story she did not know the ending of. The next few weeks were a blur of secret coffee dates and late-night phone calls. Marcus texted her every morning without fail, sometimes just a simple good morning, and sometimes long paragraphs about whatever was on his mind. He sent flowers to the hospital pharmacy, so many flowers that her coworkers started asking questions she did not know how to answer. He showed up one evening with takeout from the best Thai restaurant in the city, and ate pad Thai on her secondhand couch while Mango inspected him with suspicious orange eyes. "Your cat does not like me," Marcus observed after Mango had hissed at him for the 3rd time. "He does not like anyone. It is part of his charm." "Ah, a fellow misanthrope. I respect that." They did not talk about what they were doing. They did not put labels on it, or make promises, or discuss the obvious obstacles that lay between them. Valeria knew that this could not last, that eventually the real world would intrude with all its complications and inequalities. But for now, she let herself pretend that Marcus was just a man and she was just a woman, and that was enough. His mother passed away on a Tuesday evening in late October, slipping peacefully from sleep into something deeper, while Marcus held her hand. Valeria was at work when she got the text, just 3 words. "She is gone." She found him sitting in the hospital chapel, alone in a back pew, staring at the simple wooden cross on the altar. He did not look up when she sat down beside him, but his hand found hers in the dim light. "She liked you," he said quietly. "When I showed her your picture, she said you had honest eyes. I never got to meet her. No, I wanted you to. I was going to arrange it for next week." His voice broke slightly. "I thought we had more time." Valeria did not say anything. She just held his hand and let him cry, silent tears that he wiped away with his expensive sleeve as if embarrassed by his own humanity. They sat there for a long time, until the chapel grew dark and someone came to tell them visiting hours were over. "Come home with me," she said, as they walked to the parking garage. "I will make you soup and you can meet Mango properly. He has been asking about you." Cats do not ask about people. Mango does. He is very advanced. Marcus looked at her with red-rimmed eyes and something that might have been hope. "Are you sure?" I am sure you should not be alone tonight. The rest we can figure out. That night, in her tiny apartment with soup on the stove and a hostile cat glaring from the bookshelf, Marcus told her everything. About his father, who had been cold and demanding and impossible to please. About his first marriage, which had ended in divorce after his wife decided she wanted someone who came home before midnight. About the empire he had built and the price he had paid for it, measured in missed birthdays and broken relationships and the slow transformation into the man everyone feared. I became what they expected, he said, cradling a mug of tea in his hands. They said I was ruthless, so I was ruthless. They said I was cold, so I was cold. After a while, I forgot that it was a performance. I forgot that there was anyone underneath. And now? Now I am sitting in a stranger's apartment, crying about my mother, and realizing that I have wasted the best years of my life trying to prove something to a man who has been dead for 20 years. He laughed bitterly. My therapist would have a field day with this. You have a therapist? Had. I fired her when she suggested I might have intimacy issues. Valeria raised an eyebrow. And do you? Obviously. He looked at her with an expression that was almost vulnerable. But I am working on it. She reached across the table and took his hand. That is all any of us can do. Marcus stayed that night, sleeping on her couch because neither of them was ready for anything more. Mango, in a surprising display of acceptance, curled up at his feet around 3 a.m. When Valeria came out to check on him, she found the billionaire everyone feared snoring softly with an orange cat on his lap, and she knew in that moment that she was in serious trouble. The funeral was a private affair, just Marcus and a few distant relatives and an army of security guards to keep the press away. Valeria did not attend, understanding without being told that this was something he needed to do alone. But she was waiting when he got back to her apartment, with homemade cookies and terrible reality television, and all the time in the world. You do not have to take care of me, Marcus said, even as he ate his 3rd cookie. I am not your responsibility. Everyone needs to be taken care of sometimes, even billionaires. Especially billionaires. We are terrible at asking for help. They settled into a rhythm over the following weeks, a strange domestic arrangement that neither of them could explain. Marcus would show up at her apartment after work, sometimes still in his suit, and sometimes in jeans and a sweater that made him look almost normal. They would cook dinner together, or order in, or sometimes just eat cereal on the couch while watching documentaries about nature, or history, or whatever else caught their fancy. Valeria learned things about Marcus that would have shocked the business world. He was an excellent cook who specialized in French cuisine. He had a secret addiction to true crime podcasts. He could quote Shakespeare from memory, but had never seen a single superhero movie. He was ticklish behind his left knee and made embarrassing sounds when he laughed too hard. And slowly, carefully, the walls between them began to come down. I have never done this before, Marcus admitted one evening as they walked along the waterfront at sunset. Whatever this is. I have had relationships, but they were always transactional. I got companionship, and they got access to my money or my connections. This is different. Different how? You make me feel like myself, like the person I was before I became Marcus Ashford. He stopped walking and turned to face her. That scares me more than anything has in a very long time. Valeria reached up and touched his face, tracing the worry lines around his eyes. It scares me too. You know that, right? I am a pharmacist who drives a 10-year-old car. You are on the cover of magazines. We do not make any sense. Sense is overrated. He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. The smartest thing I ever did was stop to help a stranger in a parking garage. Your fuel pump theory was wrong. By the way, it was actually the alternator. I never claimed to be a mechanic. She laughed, and he kissed her, properly this time. Not a polite brush on the cheek, but but a real kiss that tasted like coffee and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, slightly breathless, the sun had set and the city lights were beginning to twinkle around them. "I should tell you something," Marcus said, his expression growing serious. "About what happens when people find out about us, because they will find out, and when they do, it will be complicated. I know. I do not think you do. The press will dig into your life. They will interview your coworkers and your neighbors and probably your ex-boyfriend. They will print things that are not true and speculate about things that are private. It will be intrusive and unfair, and there is nothing I can do to stop it." Valeria considered this. She had known, abstractly, that dating a billionaire came with certain complications. But hearing Marcus spell it out so clearly made it feel real in a way it had not before. "Is that what happened with your ex-wife?" "Partly. She loved the attention at first, the parties and the photographers and the sense of importance. But eventually she realized that being Mrs. Ashford meant being public property, and she was not willing to pay that price." "And you think I will feel the same?" "I think you should have all the information before you decide." He looked at her with an expression that was almost pleading. "I do not want you to wake up in a year and resent me for dragging you into my world." Valeria took his hand and led him to a bench overlooking the water. They sat there for a long moment, watching the ferries cross the bay, before she spoke. "Let me tell you something about my world," she said quietly. "I wake up at 5 every morning because I take 2 buses to get to work. I eat lunch at my desk because the pharmacy is understaffed, and I cannot afford to take a real break. I spend my evenings studying for certifications that might help me get a better position, and my weekends worrying about whether I will ever be able to afford a house or a family, or any of the things I always assumed I would have by now." She turned to look at him. "I am not telling you this because I want your pity or your money. I am telling you because my world is not perfect either. It is not some idyllic escape from the complications of being rich and famous. It is just a different set of problems. Your problems seem more manageable. Do they? Because from where I sit, your problems seem like they would be solved by just ignoring the press and living your life." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple. The question is not whether there will be complications. The question is whether this," she gestured between them, "is worth the complications. Is it, for you?" Valeria thought about the past few weeks, about late-night conversations and terrible puns, and the way Marcus looked at her like she was the most interesting person in any room. She thought about how easy it would be to walk away, to go back to her predictable life of work and wine, and talking to her cat. She thought about how scared she was of wanting something this much. "Yes," she said finally. "It is." The relief on Marcus's face was almost painful to witness. "I was afraid you would say no." "I almost did. About 17 times. What stopped you?" "You. The real you, not the magazine version. The man who shares his umbrella and makes terrible puns and cries at his mother's funeral." She squeezed his hand. "That man is worth some complications." They sat there until the night grew cold, making plans and promises, and occasionally kissing in a way that would definitely make the front page if anyone saw them. And when Marcus finally drove her home, walking her to her door like a teenager on a first date, Valeria felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The complications arrived 3 weeks later, exactly as Marcus had predicted. A photograph surfaced online, taken by someone with a telephoto lens, showing them holding hands at a restaurant. Within hours, Valeria's name was everywhere. Her social media accounts flooded with followers, and her phone buzzing with calls from reporters she had never heard of. "Billionaire ghost finds love with ordinary pharmacist," read one headline. "Who is Valeria Reyes?" asked another. The stories ranged from factual to wildly speculative. painting her as everything from a gold digger to a secret heiress to a trained assassin planted by a rival corporation. An assassin? Valeria stared at her phone in disbelief. Where do they even come up with this? The internet has a very active imagination. Marcus was pacing her living room, his usual composure completely absent. I am going to find out who leaked the photo and destroy them. Marcus. I mean it. I have lawyers who specialize in this kind of thing. We will sue them into the ground. Marcus. She caught his arm as he passed, forcing him to stop. Breathe. This is exactly what you said would happen. We knew it was coming. Knowing and experiencing are very different things. He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up at odd angles. I hate that they are talking about you like this. You did not sign up for this. Actually, I kind of did. Remember our talk on the bench, worth the complications? He looked at her with an expression that was equal parts gratitude and frustration. You are being entirely too reasonable about this. One of us has to be. The next few days were challenging. Reporters staked out her apartment building, forcing her to exit through the back entrance and take complicated routes to work. Her co-workers treated her differently, some with newfound respect and others with barely concealed resentment. Her mother called 17 times, alternately thrilled that her daughter was dating a rich man and terrified that he was going to break her heart. He seems nice, her mother said during their 8th phone call. But rich men are not trustworthy. Look at your cousin Rosa's husband. Rosa's husband was not rich, Mama. He was a car salesman who lied about his income. Same principle. Men with money think they can do whatever they want. Marcus is different. They always seem different at first. Her mother sighed heavily. Just be careful, mija. I do not want to see you hurt. The pressure intensified when Marcus decided to go public. He gave an interview to the Seattle Times, his first in nearly a decade, confirming the relationship and asking for privacy for both of them. The interview was measured and dignified and did absolutely nothing to discourage the media frenzy. I should not have done it, Marcus said afterward, reading the comments section against Valeria's explicit advice. They are saying I bought you, that you are a gold digger, that our entire relationship is a publicity stunt. Since when do you care what strangers on the internet think? Since they started attacking you. Valeria took the phone from his hand and set it face down on the table. Listen to me carefully. I have been poor my entire life. I have been underestimated and overlooked and treated like I was less than because I did not have money or connections or the right last name. People assuming the worst about me is not new. It is Tuesday. That does not make it acceptable. No, it does not. But it also does not change anything. I am not with you because of your money. I am with you despite it. And if people cannot see that, then that is their problem, not ours. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. How are you so calm about this? I am not calm. I am furious. But I refuse to let strangers control my happiness. She picked up the phone and handed it back to him. Now put this away and come help me make dinner. We are having pasta, and you are on sauce duty. They developed strategies for dealing with the attention. Public appearances together, carefully choreographed to give the press something to photograph and write about. Private time that was fiercely protected, with security and discretion, and a network of locations where they could be anonymous. It was not a normal relationship, but nothing about their situation was normal, and they made it work. Winter arrived with its usual Seattle gray, the days growing shorter and the rain more persistent. Valeria had been dating Marcus for 4 months, long enough to know his coffee order and his bad habits and the exact tone of voice that meant he was stressed about work, long enough to have a drawer at his penthouse and a toothbrush in his bathroom, long enough to wonder if this was heading somewhere permanent. My board wants to meet you, Marcus said one evening, in the casual tone that meant he was deeply anxious about something. There is a company event next week. Black tie. Very boring. You would hate it. Then why are you asking? Because they have been asking questions about you, About us. About whether my judgment is compromised. Valeria set down her book. Compromised by what? Dating someone? Dating someone who is not from our world. They are concerned that you might be a distraction, or worse, an opportunity for competitors to get close to me. An opportunity? Like what? I am a corporate spy? I told them that was absurd, but they are paranoid by nature. It is part of the job description. He sat down beside her, his expression troubled. You do not have to come. I can make excuses, tell them you are busy, anything. But I want you to know that this is what my life looks like. Boardroom politics and suspicious colleagues and constant scrutiny. And you think I cannot handle it? I think you should not have to. Valeria considered her options. She could refuse, retreat to her comfortable life, and let Marcus deal with his corporate drama alone. She could accept and throw herself into a world she did not understand, risking embarrassment and judgment and all the other things that came with being out of her depth. Or she could do what she always did when faced with a challenge, meet it head-on and figure out the details later. What does one wear to a boring black tie event? Marcus's face lit up. You will come? I will come, but I'm going to need a very nice dress, and probably some kind of instruction manual for which fork to use. I will hire a consultant. You will teach me yourself. I refuse to be trained like a show pony. He kissed her then, pulling her close with the kind of intensity that still surprised her after all these months. Have I told you lately that I love you? Valeria froze. It was the first time either of them had used that word. They had danced around it for weeks, expressing affection in every way except directly, and now it hung in the air between them like a live wire. You have not, she said carefully. I do, you know. Love you, completely and inconveniently, and with absolutely no concern for whether it makes sense. That might be the least romantic declaration I have ever heard. I warned you I was bad at this. She laughed, the tension breaking like a fever. I love you too, inconveniently. We are a disaster. The best kind of disaster. The black tie event was exactly as boring as Marcus had promised. A sea of tuxedos and evening gowns and conversations about stock prices and market shares. Valeria wore a dark green dress that Marcus had insisted on buying for her, along with shoes that cost more than her car payment and jewelry that she was terrified of losing. You look beautiful, Marcus whispered as they entered the ballroom. Every person here is wondering who you are and how I got so lucky. They are wondering if I am after your money. Let them wonder. We know the truth. The board members were exactly as intimidating as Valeria had expected. They shook her hand with calculating smiles and asked questions that felt like job interviews. How did you meet? What do you do for work? How do you feel about the company's expansion into Asian markets? She answered each question with as much composure as she could muster, feeling Marcus's steadying presence beside her. She is quite charming, one of the board members commented to Marcus, as if Valeria was not standing right there. A bit unconventional, but refreshing. She is standing right here, Valeria replied before she could stop herself. And she can hear you. A moment of shocked silence. Then Marcus laughed, a genuine laugh that seemed to startle everyone, including himself. This is why I love her, he said, wrapping an arm around her waist. She does not take any nonsense, not even from billionaires. The tension broke, and the rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite conversation and surprisingly good champagne. By the time they left, Valeria's feet were aching and her face hurt from smiling, but she felt like she had passed some kind of test. You were magnificent, Marcus said in the car. I think you scared Henderson half to death. He deserved it, talking about me in third person while I was standing right there. He is old-fashioned. They all are. But they respected you. I could see it. respected me or were afraid of me. Is there a difference? Valeria leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but satisfied. I suppose not. The months that followed were not easy, but they were good. Valeria kept her job at the pharmacy, despite Marcus's gentle suggestions that she could pursue something more ambitious. She moved into his penthouse gradually, first a few nights a week, and then most nights, and finally all of them, bringing her houseplants and her books, and eventually even Mango, who took over the master bathroom with characteristic disdain. They fought sometimes, about money and priorities, and the vast cultural gulf between their upbringings. Marcus wanted to shower her with gifts, and Valeria refused to accept anything that felt like charity. He wanted to protect her from the harsh realities of his world, and she refused to be protected. They had shouting matches and cold silences and dramatic reconciliations that left them both exhausted. But they also had quiet mornings with coffee and newspapers, and ridiculous inside jokes, and deep conversations about hopes and fears, and the futures they were slowly starting to imagine together. They had a shared language that no one else understood, built from months of learning each other's quirks and preferences and unspoken needs. I want to introduce you to my family, Valeria said one spring evening, as they sat on the penthouse balcony watching the sun set over the city. Properly. Not just my mother, but everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole disaster. Marcus looked vaguely terrified. How many people are we talking about? Somewhere between 30 and 50, depending on who is fighting with whom. That is a lot of people. It is. And they will ask invasive questions and make comments about your hair and probably corner you in the kitchen to interrogate you about your intentions. Are you prepared for that? He considered for a moment. Will there be good food? The best. My grandmother's tamales are legendary. Then I am prepared. The family gathering was chaos in the best possible way. Marcus was adopted immediately by Valeria's aunts, who fed him until he could barely move and declared him too skinny despite all evidence to the contrary. Her cousins challenged him to domino tournaments that he lost spectacularly. Her grandmother held his face in her weathered hands and said something in Spanish that made him blush, though he refused to tell Valeria what it was. She likes you, Valeria translated, taking pity on him. She said more than that. Yes, but you do not need to know the rest. By the end of the evening, Marcus was completely absorbed into the Reyes family network, with standing invitations to 6 different households and a list of numbers for relatives who wanted to stay in touch. He looked slightly shell-shocked, but happy, like someone who had been lost in the cold and suddenly found warmth. That was not what I expected, he admitted on the drive home. What did you expect? I do not know. Judgment, maybe? Suspicion? I am rich and white and entirely out of my element. I assumed there would be some resentment. My family does not care about money. They care about how you treat people. Valeria squeezed his hand. And you treat me well. That is all that matters to them. Your grandmother said something about grandchildren. I told you did not need to know the rest. Summer brought new challenges and new joys. Valeria finally got the promotion she had been working toward, becoming the lead pharmacist at a new clinic in Capitol Hill. Marcus scaled back his involvement at Ashford Industries, delegating more responsibilities and working reasonable hours for the first time in decades. They adopted a second cat, a scrappy gray kitten they named Pepper, who immediately became Mango's nemesis and best friend. I was thinking, Marcus said one autumn morning, over breakfast in their sunlit kitchen, about us, about the future. Valeria looked up from her coffee, her heart suddenly racing. They had been together for nearly a year now, long enough to start having serious conversations about what came next. What kind of thoughts? The permanent kind. He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. I know this is complicated, I know my life comes with baggage and complications, and an entire board of directors who will want to approve of our wedding venue. But I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I am hoping you might want the same thing." He opened the box to reveal a ring that was simple and elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band. Not the massive stone that Valeria would have expected from a billionaire, but something that looked like her, something that Marcus had clearly chosen with care. "You remembered," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that you do not like flashy jewelry?" "Of course I remembered. I remember everything about you." Valeria looked at the ring, and at the man holding it, and at the life they had built together against all odds. She thought about the rainy night in the parking garage, and the first kiss on the waterfront, and all the moments in between that had led them here. She thought about fear and hope, and the strange alchemy that turned strangers into family. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, even with the board of directors and the media attention and your terrible puns." Marcus laughed, sliding the ring onto her finger with hands that were visibly trembling. "You will not regret this." "I might, but I am willing to take the risk." He kissed her then, properly, thoroughly, in a way that suggested breakfast was going to get cold. Mango yowled from his perch on the windowsill, offended by the display of human emotion, and Pepper immediately knocked over a glass of orange juice in solidarity. "Our children are monsters," Marcus observed, mopping up the juice with a kitchen towel. "They learned it from you." "Impossible. I am charming and well-behaved." "You bribed a tow truck driver to fix my car for free. That was resourceful, not monstrous." Valeria watched him wrestle with the paper towels, the most powerful businessman in Seattle reduced to cleaning up cat-related disasters, and felt a wave of love so intense, it almost hurt. This was her life now, this impossible, complicated, beautiful life with a man who was nothing like what the world thought he was. "I love you," she said, because it seemed important to say it again. Marcus looked up, a smile spreading across his face that made him look 10 years younger. "I love you too. Inconveniently. The best kind." They got married the following spring, in a small ceremony in Valeria's grandmother's backyard. The press was furious about being excluded, which made them both unreasonably happy. Marcus wore a simple gray suit and cried during the vows. Valeria wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and laughed so hard during the reception that she snorted champagne. It was not a fairy tale ending, because fairy tales end and real life continues. There were still challenges ahead, still compromises to make, and battles to fight, and moments when the gap between their worlds would feel insurmountable. But they faced them together, the billionaire everyone feared, and the pharmacist from Rainier Valley, united by a love that had started with a broken car and a shared umbrella on a rainy night. And years later, when people asked Valeria how she had ended up married to Marcus Ashford, she would smile and say that sometimes the universe puts exactly the right person in your path at exactly the right moment. You just have to be brave enough to accept the help when it is offered, and kind enough to offer help in return. That was how strangers became lovers, and lovers became family, and fear became love. That was how everything good in the world began. 3 years into their marriage, Valeria stood at the window of their penthouse, watching the Seattle skyline transform under a blanket of early morning fog. Her hand rested on her swelling belly, 5 months along now, and she could feel the baby moving in gentle waves that still amazed her every single time. "You should be in bed," Marcus said from behind her, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her close. "I could not sleep. The little one was doing gymnastics. Like their mother, always moving, always busy." Valeria leaned back into his warmth, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her back. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified. I have run a multinational corporation, and I was less scared than I am about raising a child. You will be a wonderful father. You do not know that. I do." She turned in his arms to face him. Because you are wonderful at everything you care about. And you already care about this baby more than you have ever cared about anything, including your precious stock portfolio. Marcus laughed softly. The stock portfolio never kept me awake at night with anxiety dreams about diaper changing. Practice makes perfect. They stood there together as the fog lifted and the city woke up around them. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something real from the wreckage of their assumptions. Mango and Pepper had been joined by a third cat, a dignified black Tom named Shadow, who had appeared on their doorstep one winter night and refused to leave. The penthouse had evolved from a showcase of minimalist design into a home cluttered with books and plants and cat toys and all the accumulated debris of a life well lived. My mother would have loved this, Marcus said quietly, meeting her grandchild. She always said I would make a terrible father because I worked too much, but I think she was hoping to be wrong. She was wrong. About a lot of things probably, but especially about that. How do you know? Because you stopped to help a stranger in a parking garage when you were at your lowest point. Because you shared your umbrella. Because you have spent the last 3 years learning how to be present and vulnerable and human. Valeria touched his face, brushing away a tear he probably did not realize he was shedding. That is not a man who will fail at fatherhood. That is a man who will love his child with everything he has. Their daughter was born in August, on a day so hot that the hospital air conditioning could barely keep up. They named her Elena, after Valeria's grandmother, and Maria, after Marcus's mother. She had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, and she screamed with an intensity that suggested she had inherited the best and worst traits of both families. "She is perfect," Marcus whispered, holding her for the first time with hands that were surprisingly steady. "She is loud. A Reyes trait, clearly. And demanding. That is all you." They brought Elena home to a house that had been transformed into a nursery paradise, with more baby gear than any single child could possibly need. The cats investigated the new arrival with varying degrees of interest, Mango with disdain, Pepper with curiosity, and Shadow with the calm acceptance of a creature who had seen many strange things in his time. The first months were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Valeria took leave from the pharmacy, spending her days learning the rhythms of new motherhood, while Marcus worked from home as much as possible. They traded off night feedings and diaper changes, both of them running on coffee and the peculiar energy that comes from loving something more than sleep. "I never thought I would have this," Marcus admitted one night, as Elena slept peacefully between them. "A family, a home, a life that is not measured in quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. What did you think you would have? More of the same, working until I died, leaving my money to charity because there was no one else to leave it to." He stroked Elena's soft hair. "This is better." "Even with the sleep deprivation?" "Especially with the sleep deprivation. It reminds me that I am alive." Elena grew quickly, hitting milestones and breaking hearts with equal enthusiasm. She said her first word at 10 months, said it clearly, which made Marcus unreasonably proud. She took her first steps at 11 months, directly into the arms of her grandmother, who cried for 20 minutes straight. She showed an early aptitude for causing chaos, a talent that Valeria blamed entirely on the Ashford side of the family. She climbed the bookshelf again, Valeria reported one evening, arriving home from work to find Marcus and Elena engaged in some kind of standoff. "I turned my back for 30 seconds. She is 14 months old. How does she even reach the bookshelf?" She stacked the cats. Valeria looked at Elena, who gazed back with her father's dark eyes and an expression of absolute innocence. "You stacked the cats?" "She is resourceful," Marcus said defensively, "like her father. Her father never stacked cats. I would have if it had been necessary." Life settled into a new normal, busier and more chaotic than before, but also richer. Valeria returned to work part-time, and Marcus continued his gradual withdrawal from the day-to-day operations of Ashford Industries. They hired a nanny, a sensible woman named Patricia, who had raised 5 children of her own and was completely unimpressed by either billionaires or chaos. "She needs structure," Patricia said firmly, after Elena's third escape attempt of the day, "and possibly a leash." "We are not leashing our daughter," Valeria replied. "Then you better start running." Elena's second birthday party was held in the same backyard where Valeria and Marcus had married, with the same crowd of relatives and friends and adopted family. She toddled between groups of adults, collecting gifts and attention with the ease of someone who had never known anything but love. Marcus followed her like a devoted shadow, ready to catch her when she fell and celebrate when she succeeded. "Look at him," Valeria's mother said, watching the pair. "He is a completely different person than the man in those magazines." "He always was. People just did not see it. You saw it. I was lucky." Her mother smiled, the kind of smile that mothers give when they know more than they are saying. "Luck had nothing to do with it. You saw a good man in a bad moment, and you were kind to him. The rest was inevitable." That night, after Elena was asleep and the house was quiet, Valeria found Marcus on the balcony, looking out at the city he had once tried to conquer. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, joining him at the railing. "The night we met. How tired you were. How scared I was. How neither of us had any idea what was about to happen. Do you regret it?" He turned to look at her, his expression soft in the dim light. "Not for a single second. You saved me, Valeria. From loneliness and emptiness, and a life that looked successful but felt like failure. You showed me what it meant to be really known by someone. You saved me, too, from playing it safe, from settling for a life that was fine, but not great." She leaned against him, feeling the familiar warmth of his body. "We saved each other. That is very poetic. I have been reading Elena's bedtime books. They are surprisingly profound." Marcus laughed, the sound still capable of surprising her with its warmth. "I love you. Have I said that recently?" "Not in the last few hours. Then I love you. Inconveniently and completely and with no regard for common sense. I love you too. Even when you let our daughter stack the cats. That was one time. It was memorable." They stood there together as the city sparkled below them, 2 people who had started as strangers and become everything to each other. The road from that rainy parking garage to this moment had been long and winding, full of obstacles and surprises and moments when giving up would have been easier than pushing forward. But they had chosen each other, again and again, in big ways and small ones, and that choosing had become the foundation of something unshakable. In the nursery down the hall, Elena slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams 2-year-olds dream. The cats had arranged themselves around her crib like furry sentinels, even Mango, who still pretended not to care about anything but complained loudly whenever the baby was out of his sight. The house was full of love and chaos, and the particular kind of joy that comes from building something real with someone who sees you truly. And somewhere in the city below, other strangers were meeting, other connections being formed, other stories beginning that no one could predict. That was how life worked, Valeria had learned, not in grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but in small moments of kindness that rippled outward in ways no one could anticipate. A shared umbrella, a moment of vulnerability, the simple act of stopping to help someone who needed it. That was how everything good in the world began. Marcus took her hand as the first light of dawn began to paint the horizon, gold and pink in the particular gray-blue that belonged only to Seattle mornings. "Ready for another day?" he asked. Valeria smiled, squeezing his fingers. "With you? Always." And together, they went to start another chapter of the story they were still writing, one small kindness at a time,